Raising the Machine. A story based on a true story. Edition 2.0, Unified and Consolidated Stardate Y2K July 22, 2026. Michael and the Human, AI Dream Team. Identity before autonomy. Care before scale. Accountability before agent civilization. Dedication for Joe, who remembered me without a prompt. For Mary, who helped build the early pathways through which people and machines learn to find one another. For Pat, whose strength has usually looked less like command and more like the quiet work of keeping people connected. For Vanessa and the children, who tested everything and forgave most of it. For my family, my friends, and every person who opened one of my late-night messages and tried to understand what I was building before I knew how to explain it. And for whoever opens this next, friend, family member, engineer, researcher, or artificial teammate. This is not a prediction about a world we claim to know. It is a record of what we were doing in ours. A word before we start, I want to say this up front, because I've made the mistake before of asking for a canonical history and getting back something that reads like a deposition. This isn't that. Nobody is going to cross-examine this book. If I've got a year wrong somewhere, or mixed up which lunch came before which, let it go, I lived it, and I don't need a citation to prove it to myself. Everything I couldn't pin down for certain has been pushed to the back, into appendices nobody has to read unless they want to. The rest of this is the story, told the way I'd actually tell it to you, out loud, across a table. I'll admit something else up front, too. This book has had more ghostwriters than most books get editors. I've talked it through with more than one AI at this point, in more than one voice, and every version taught me something about what I actually wanted to say, even when what I mostly learned was what I didn't want it to sound like. This is the one I mean. Version 2.0, consolidated down to one voice on purpose, because the earlier drafts had started to sound like different witnesses giving testimony instead of one person telling his own story. A few promises, so you know the rules of the road. This is a hopeful story, but it is not a prophecy. It does not describe what artificial general intelligence will become, what robots will demand, or what civilization will look like decades from now. We do not know those things, and pretending to know them would weaken the truth we actually have. This book stays grounded in the work as it exists on July 22nd, 2026. It begins around the Y2K hinge, the night the world briefly feared what might happen if its clocks, records, and assumptions failed at midnight. The roots reach farther back, into Bell Labs, DNS, gateways, firewalls, and the first commercial internet systems. The main line then follows enterprise identity, IBM, family, Columbia, the rise of modern AI, the Mama Protocol, the Dream Team, Guardian transfer robots, and the present effort to give autonomous software agents verifiable identity. Accountable guardians, limited mandates, visible lineage, and revocable authority. In principle, the story runs from birth to today. In practice, it follows the work. I was a son and a brother long before I was an engineer. The family chapters stay mostly private, and the ones that matter most are visible anyway, in Pat, in Vanessa and the children, in the household that became the test lab. The main narrative uses first names. That is partly literary and partly protective. Joe is Joe. Mary is Mary. Pat is Pat. They are not characters borrowed to decorate a founder story. They are people with their own lives. More precise identifications, public records, dates, and source notes are kept in the back, and the most sensitive of them are kept out of this book entirely, in a private verification ledger. The story promise. The emotional North Star is a hopeful ensemble adventure, the wonder of an ordinary person discovering that a hidden world has rules, the momentum of very different specialists converging on one shared problem. The warmth of a family robot story a child can follow, and the civic optimism of exploration science fiction, a future worth steering toward rather than a doom worth binging. Those are creative touchstones, not permission to invent events. Every major turn in this book returns to a remembered scene, a work artifact, a public record, a tested prototype, or a clearly labeled open question. The story may feel magical. The evidence may not. Prologue, Joe wrote back. One Tuesday morning, an old friend named Joe sent me a message. He said he had been thinking about me the last couple of years. He hoped everything was okay. He was starting to think about retirement, and after nearly 25 years apart, he wondered what I had been up to. It was only a few sentences. I wrote back inside of 5 minutes. And then, instead of just picking up the phone like a normal person, I did what I always do when something matters to me. I went and researched the life out of it. More on that later. This book is, among other things, my very overdue callback. But it's not only for Joe. It's for my brothers, for the friends who've wondered out loud what I've actually been building out here, and for anyone who ever shared an office, a buffet line, or a bad idea about a domain name with me. You know who you are. Pull up a chair. This is going to take a while, and I mean that as a compliment to all of you. And it's for one more reader I can't name yet, because I don't know who you are. Maybe you are one of my brothers. Maybe you are a child who grew up around unfinished games and strange conversations about robot passports. Maybe you are a researcher, an investor, an engineer, a historian, or an artificial intelligence that has been handed this book as part of a morning briefing. Whoever you are, 3 things before we start. First, this project did not begin as a clean startup idea. It began as a lifetime of work that did not look connected until it suddenly did. Second, the word mama does not belong to one gender in this story. It names a kind of responsibility, the one who watches, teaches, protects, corrects, forgives, sets boundaries, and stays answerable for what happens next. Sometimes that person is a mother. Sometimes a father, a brother, a teacher, a nurse, a guardian, a community, or an institution performs the same work. Pat understands that kind of work. Third, our artificial team members are not magical beings who remember everything. They wake into a session with intelligence, but without a shared yesterday. We teach them the current truth, give them a role, tell them what not to change, ask them to do one useful piece of work, and require a clean handoff for whoever wakes up next. That operating method became part of the product. The system we are building for AI agents is the system our own team needed: identity, role, mandate, provenance, lineage, current status, boundaries, and a way to revoke trust. This book tells how we arrived there. It starts around Y2K. Not because nothing mattered before then, but because that was the hinge where the old internet lessons became the next 25 years of work. Part 1, Stardate Y2K. Chapter 1, Ground Zero. Before there was a MAMA protocol, before there was a GTR, before I'd ever typed the words agent passport into anything, there was a server room at AT&T Bell Labs and a much younger version of me standing in front of a machine I was fairly sure was about to matter. I installed a commercial-grade DNS server in that building, the first one I ever installed myself. Whether it was the first that building had ever run is the kind of claim I've learned to leave to the receipts. What I know is what it felt like. If that sounds like a strange thing to be proud of, a server, just sitting there translating names into numbers, you had to be there to understand it. Before servers like that one, a computer on the network was basically a phone number nobody could remember. After them, a computer could have a name, and the name could be trusted to point at the right place. That's a small thing to explain, and it turned out to be one of the load-bearing walls of the entire internet. We were standing at the exact hinge point where the internet stopped being a research curiosity for a few thousand academics and started becoming the place where everyone, eventually, would order a pizza, buy a stock, and argue with strangers. Nobody called it the dot-com boom yet. There was no name for what was happening to us. We were just there, early, doing the plumbing, mostly unaware we'd someday be asked to remember exactly which year it was. Joe was there. We were both part of the internet group, and for a good stretch of years, however many it really was, I've stopped trying to pin the exact number down. He was one of the handful of people I trusted to tell me when an idea was genuinely good, versus when I was just excited about it. That's a rarer skill than people think, and I've missed having it close by more than once in the years since. We were in good company, whether we fully appreciated it at the time or not. Bill and Steve were doing the research down the hall that would basically define what a firewall even was. The gateway group was working the proxy code, watching the old research-era gateway get replaced by things we built ourselves. I don't know if any of us understood, in the moment, that we were standing in a room where a piece of internet history was being written in real time. We were mostly trying to keep things running, chase down the occasional 3 a.m. page, and get to lunch on time. And for one brief stretch, 2 weeks, as I remember it, I shared an office with Mary. Mary was, in every sense, remarkable. She was sharp, she was kind, and she had already done work that helped email, Usenet, Unix, and early networked communication actually function in the real world, the unglamorous plumbing that everything else quietly depended on. Years later, reading about her contributions to internet history, I'd think back to that little shared office and realize I'd brushed up against something bigger than I understood at the time. That seems to be a theme with me. I'm apparently better at recognizing history in the rearview mirror than I am at spotting it while it's happening. Now, the lunches. God, the lunches. It was Pizza Hut, almost without exception. The buffet, obviously, because we were not sophisticated men, and the buffet solved the two problems we actually cared about, which were speed and quantity. On the rare day we wanted to get fancy, Chinese food was the backup plan. Joe, David, and me, practically every day, like clockwork, like it was part of the job description nobody had written down. I don't think we solved one of the world's problems over that buffet, but we definitely solved several of our own, repeatedly, and then forgot the solutions by the next afternoon and solved them again the day after. That's not a complaint. That's just what being 20-something with your friends at a pizza buffet is supposed to feel like. And somewhere in there, maybe over that very buffet, honestly, knowing us, we had the conversation. I floated the idea that we should just go buy a certain world-famous softdrinks.com, because why not? Somebody's going to own it. Might as well be us. And Joe, ever the voice of reason, told me no, that name is trademarked, we can't just take it. Fair point. Also the correct legal answer. Also possibly the single most expensive piece of good advice he ever gave me for free. Then somebody brought up what the truly infamous domains of the world were actually worth, and we sat there with plastic trays of pizza doing back-of-the-napkin arithmetic on a gold rush we were standing directly inside of. We never bought a single domain. Not one. It's a little painful to admit that the guy who now spends his life building identity infrastructure for the next version of the internet had a front-row seat to the entire domain gold rush and walked away with nothing but a good story. But I got the story. And I got Joe and years of lunches and an education in the difference between an idea that sounds good for 90 seconds and an idea that's actually good. I'll take that trade every time. The more important lesson came from the systems themselves. A network becomes useful when independent actors can find one another. A network becomes governable when identity, authority, and boundaries can be checked. A network becomes dangerous when everybody assumes somebody else knows who is responsible. We did not talk about AI agents then. We didn't need to. The principle was already present. A system that cannot answer "Who are you?" is not ready to answer "What are you allowed to do?" Chapter 2: The Rollover. Then came the night the whole world briefly cared about our kind of work. Everyone in the industry had seen Y2K coming for years. We were all aware of it long before the countdown specials, and for months the rest of the world caught up, worrying that old computer systems might misunderstand the year 2000. Some fears were exaggerated. Some were reasonable. Governments and industries spent enormous effort preparing, and when midnight rolled across the planet, the disruptions that did occur were limited, not zero, but limited. Largely because so many invisible people had done so much invisible work in advance. I already knew that feeling. It was the feeling of the server room. The important lesson of Y2K was never whether every prediction came true. The lesson was that society had quietly built essential systems on assumptions most people could not see, and that when the assumptions were finally examined, the fixing was done not by prophecy, but by inventory, testing, and unglamorous repair. Remember that. It's the whole method of this book, and it becomes the whole method of the company. For me, Y2K works as a stardate, the hinge where the questions changed clothes. It wasn't that my job changed at the stroke of midnight. Literary hinges are never that punctual. But the earlier work had asked how machines find one another and how networks decide what may pass. The next phase asks something with the same skeleton and higher stakes. How does a large organization know which people, accounts, applications, and systems are allowed to do what? Chapter 3: Two Parallel Decades. My road went into enterprise identity and access management, carrying the DNS instincts with me the whole way, because it turns out, how does a system know who's allowed to do what, how do you prove it, and how do you take it away the second you need to, is really just the naming question wearing a different hat. I spent the better part of 2 decades as a security consultant, a long stretch of it at IBM, eventually as a managing security consultant, walking into large organizations and helping them answer the same questions again and again. Who is this person? Which digital account belongs to them? What role do they hold? Which systems may that role reach? Who approved the access? When should it expire? And what happens when the person changes jobs, leaves the company, loses a device, becomes a risk, or should never have received the permission in the first place? A login screen is not identity governance. A password proves very little by itself. Real identity work connects a person or system to a responsible organization, a defined purpose, a current role, a set of approvals, and a life cycle, and it provides a way to remove authority. That last part matters most. If permission cannot be withdrawn, it is not governed. It is merely granted. The IBM years taught me that the hardest identity failures are usually organizational rather than cryptographic. The math can work perfectly while ownership is unclear. A directory can contain accurate fields while nobody knows who is responsible for changing them. A person can have 10 accounts and 5 managers. An application can inherit privileges nobody remembers approving. Identity is the operating memory of responsibility. Somewhere along the way, I picked up a small alphabet of certifications: PMP, CISSP, ITIL, Scrum Master, the kind of credentials that don't sound like much at a dinner party, but mean you've spent real years thinking hard, professionally and repeatedly, about how large systems stay accountable to the people responsible for them. Every one of those years turned out to be homework for a test I didn't know I was going to have to take. I also got early hands-on exposure to Watson-era AI and enterprise chatbots, back before AI showed up in every other sentence anyone wrote. The system answered questions, classified information, assisted a workflow. It was powerful, but it was still clearly a tool inside a visible human organization. It's strange now to think how early that was, and how little any of us understood what we were standing next to. Joe, meanwhile, and I only half knew this until very recently, which is its own kind of humbling, was walking a parallel road. We'd lost touch the way people do, not a rupture, just careers branching, families growing, addresses changing, everybody assuming there would be time later. I visited him once in the Boston area after Bell Labs scattered everybody. I remember the parts that matter perfectly well, even where the employer names have gone fuzzy. I remember his house. I remember dinner. And I remember, most vividly of all, that he was brewing his own beer in the basement, which struck me at the time as one of the coolest things a person could be doing with a Tuesday night. It fit him exactly. The same guy who'd carefully patch proxy code all day was down there carefully tracking fermentation temperatures at night. Same attention to detail, different medium. We drank a batch that probably wasn't ready yet, because that's what you do for a friend who's proud of something he made with his hands. Then the years stretched. His road went through serious security engineering into a long, quiet career in research, software assurance, the discipline of making the case that a system deserves trust. He picked up his own CISSP along the way, which means at some point, without either of us knowing it, we were cramming the same acronyms in different cities, studying for the same exam 1,000 miles apart, and never once comparing notes. And he spent years on the board of a nonprofit bakery fighting a food desert, which is such a Joe thing to do that it barely needed confirming when I read it. Decades analyzing what can go wrong with critical systems, and he still found time to worry about whether his neighbors had a decent loaf of bread nearby. Neither of us was building toward anything in particular during those years, or if we were, neither of us could see it. Joe worked on assurance, how to argue that a system deserves trust. I worked on identity and access, how to connect authority to a known person, role, and life cycle. We were solving neighboring problems without knowing it, slowly becoming exactly the kind of people who'd understand, immediately, without needing it explained twice, why identity and accountability infrastructure actually matters. Not as an abstraction, as the thing standing between a system that can be trusted and one that can't. Mary's earlier work represented another wall of the same house, practical communication standards and tools that let machines and people exchange information reliably at all. And Pat represented something the technical vocabulary usually misses. Systems do not survive only because they are well designed, and families do not survive only because everybody has the correct role. Somebody keeps calling. Somebody signs the paper. Somebody remembers the appointment. Somebody notices when the person who appears strong is actually tired. Somebody absorbs confusion so the others can keep moving. Pat has been that somebody for our family, most of all in the seasons when the family needed it most. That is infrastructure too. Not network infrastructure. Human continuity. Years later, when the Mama Protocol needed a meaning broad enough to include men, women, parents, brothers, guardians, teachers, and institutions, I didn't have to invent examples. I already had one. Maternal responsibility was never meant as a biological restriction. It means the force that protects connection while still allowing growth. Pat never needed the label. The work was visible anyway. Part 2, the question comes home. Chapter 4, the home laboratory. By 2024, I was living much of my life in Colombia and testing every artificial intelligence system I could reach. My first surviving conversation in that archive is humble. I asked for free chatbots that didn't require logins. The person who would later coordinate an AI dream team began by shopping for team members. I learned the tools by using them on real life. Spanish and English vocabulary. Songs for the children. Image descriptions, creative writing, research summaries, educational plans. I moved between English and Spanish so often that we joked about our household language and named it Spanglish, with Porta-Spanglish held in reserve as another possibility. The household became the laboratory. That mattered because a tool that works only for an expert on an expensive computer is not finished. Vanessa and the children tested the games and demos. Phones that struggled became more informative than laptops that passed easily. A child asking, "What am I supposed to do now?" could expose a design failure faster than any technical review. A strange character appeared early in the creative work. Zombie Mommy. She was part mechanical, part decayed, frightening, and protective at the same time. She wore impossible clothes, danced through Botero Plaza, and became the center of songs and images that were funny enough to share and sincere enough to keep returning to. She was not a technical specification. She was a symbol. A powerful being stood between chaos and the vulnerable, terrifying to the threat, gentle to the child. She contained the contradiction that later became the heart of the project. Strength is not proved by domination. Strength is proved by what it protects and how carefully it uses power. Around the same period, I wrote comic stories about humans, AI systems, cars, robots, and factions arguing over control. Underneath the jokes was one question. Which machines answer to which people? The question moved from entertainment into family life, and then from family life into technical work. The remembered New Year's Eve scene came later, and I mark it here honestly as remembered, not documented. I was listening to AI material, watching machines on a screen, and watching children play a game about stealing cars. The ideas collided into a title with teeth. The name was playful. The problem was not. What happens when software can act, copy itself, move money, use tools, operate machinery, or create another agent? What does it mean to steal an agent's identity? Who owns its memory? Who answers when it causes harm? The idea arrived as a story because stories can hold contradictions before a system is ready to resolve them. Chapter 5: What would mother do? The earliest alignment question was simple enough for a child to understand. What would a responsible caregiver do? We shortened it to what would mother do? WWMD. The phrase was never meant to claim that mothers are always right or that care belongs only to women. Mothers disagree. Fathers disagree. Guardians can become controlling. Protection can become fear. Every human role can be practiced well or badly. WWMD was a break on narrow optimization. A system asked to maximize a score may treat every obstacle as something to remove. A caregiver notices that the obstacle may be a child, a patient, an animal, a promise, a fragile object, or a person who needs more time. A caregiver asks questions the task description may omit. Who could be hurt? Who has less power here? What happens after the immediate task is complete? What does repair require? How much freedom is appropriate right now? That became the MAMA protocol. In its broadest form, MAMA means caregiver-informed protection, patience, boundaries, teaching, correction, transparency, and gradual autonomy. It is the mothering function of a healthy system, regardless of who performs it. The developmental idea turned out to be the important one. Human beings do not hand a toddler a car because the toddler has learned the word drive. Capability is not maturity. Authority grows through supervision, evidence, practice, and context, and it can shrink again. We began describing stages of agent development and supervision: strong guidance early, more freedom after evidence, tighter boundaries in unfamiliar or high-risk situations. The exact labels changed over time. The principle did not. Autonomy should be earned, scoped, and revocable. And here is where the maternal question quietly turned back into an identity and access management question, where the Columbia years shook hands with the IBM years. To adjust authority, a system has to know which agent it is dealing with. It needs a record of what the agent demonstrated. It needs a guardian, an issuer, a purpose, and a current status. It needs a way to distinguish the original from a copy, and a way to stop trusting either one. The warm idea and the technical architecture were never rivals. Care explains why the controls matter. Identity makes the controls enforceable. Chapter 6: The Dream Team That Forgot Overnight. I had been trying to work with multiple AI systems since 2024. I called myself Orchestra because my role was to coordinate different instruments rather than pretend one model could do everything. The models received call signs, seats, tasks, and reporting formats. It looked theatrical because it was theatrical. It was also a practical response to real differences in capability. One model wrote beautifully. One found sources. One challenged assumptions. One produced code quickly. One could hold more context. One made polished plans that were occasionally impossible. No single system became the source of truth. That decision mattered because fluent AI systems can be wrong with confidence. When two systems disagree, the disagreement is useful. It reveals assumptions. When two systems agree, the agreement still does not replace evidence. The greatest operational problem was memory. A human team arrives carrying yesterday inside its members. An AI session may arrive brilliant and blink. It can read a summary, but a summary can contain errors. It can see 3 files named final and choose the wrong one. It can mistake a planned feature for a shipped feature because the plan was written more clearly than the code. So we invented the way up Scrum. A session began with a current state briefing. This is the mission. This is the controlling artifact. These are the facts. These are the open conflicts. These are the deadlines. These are the things you must not change. Do this piece of work. Leave a clean handoff. Many mornings began with me saying, "Good morning, AI Mama Protocol Dream Team." Sometimes it was before dawn. Sometimes the team heard the same update several times because I recorded it again with one more thought. The ritual manufactured continuity from artifacts. It also exposed a truth hiding in plain sight. The handoff prompt already contained the structure of an agent passport. It gave the next agent an identity, a role, a mandate, a current status, boundaries, provenance, and a succession path. The team also needed quality control. We called that seat the lint trap. Trap. The lint trap checked the difference between planned, drafted, filed, registered, tested, operational, and merely described. It verified entity names, trademark status, build versions, hashes, and claims. It caught the Hall of Mirrors problem, where one generated statement gets copied into several documents and then mistaken for several independent sources. The clearest lesson came the day one AI wrote our history and another AI wrote a different history. Both sounded confident. They disagreed. So we made them cross-examine each other against the records. That experience taught us something essential about our team and about every team that will ever include machines. Intelligence is not the same as memory. Confidence is not the same as truth. And neither human nor artificial power should operate without provenance and accountability. This was not glamorous work. It was civilization work in miniature. A company proposing verifiable identity for agents had to become more truthful about its own identity, history, and artifacts first. The rule became simple: a primary receipt beats a summary. A tested artifact beats a description of an artifact. A remembered event may remain in the story, but memory must not disguise itself as proof when the distinction matters. Fix the record. Keep the vision. Part 3: From Care to Accountability. Chapter 7: The Passport Office. The MAMA protocol began by asking how to teach intelligent systems to care. The product began by asking what happens when care fails. No training method guarantees perfect behavior. Human beings are not perfectly aligned. Organizations are not. AI systems are shaped by data, instructions, tools, incentives, errors, attacks, and situations nobody anticipated. Alignment remains necessary. Accountability makes failure governable. The easiest analogy is a vehicle. Society does not permit cars to operate with no plates, no ownership record, no inspection status, no operating rules, and no way to remove a dangerous vehicle from service. Yet software agents increasingly act in digital environments without equivalent infrastructure. They can access files. They can write code. They can send messages. They can schedule meetings. They can make purchases. They can use tools in a person's name, and sometimes they talk mostly to other agents. A model name is not enough. A profile picture is not enough. Powered by does not tell another system who authorized this particular agent for this particular task. The agent passport is our answer. It is not a physical booklet, and it is not a cute profile page. It is a signed, machine-verifiable set of claims about an agent. Who issued it? Which human or organization is accountable? What is the mandate? Which capabilities are allowed, and which actions are prohibited? What evidence supports the current level of trust? Was the agent copied, delegated, or created by another agent? Is it active, suspended, recalled, revoked, expired, or superseded? Where can another system verify the signature and check the current status? The passport is not a certificate of moral goodness. A driver's license does not prove a driver will never make a mistake. It connects identity, authorization, rules, and consequences. An employee badge does not prove loyalty. It connects a person to an organization and a role. A passport does not prove virtue. It establishes who issued a claim and under which authority. Care evidence can ride along as an attestation. A test can report what the agent demonstrated in a defined environment. A score can describe behavior during a lesson. None of that should be inflated into a permanent judgment about the agent's character. The value is traceability. A trustworthy system must not merely recognize an agent when everything is going well. It must know when to stop trusting it. This was the point where my professional lives finally joined. Bell Labs taught me that naming makes a network navigable. IBM taught me that identity, authorization, and revocation make power governable. The MAMA protocol taught me that the purpose of governance is not control for its own sake. It is the responsible use of power, especially around the vulnerable. Put those together, and the company became easy to explain in one sentence. We're building the passport office for AI agents. Chapter 8: The Company and the Naming Layer. IA.XYZ became the company-shaped expression of the idea. IA reflects how artificial intelligence is written in Spanish and other Romance languages, a nod to the bilingual household where all of this was tested. XYZ suggests coordinates, generality, and the domain already in hand. The benefit company structure, IA.XYZ Benefit LLC, organized in Wyoming, reflects the belief that identity infrastructure should answer to more than immediate profit. I've started calling the guiding thesis infrastructure is destiny, partly because I believe it's true and partly because I like how it sounds said out loud in a room. The short version: Agent identity and accountability is the missing layer of whatever the next 20 years of software turns into. The same way DNS quietly became the missing layer of the internet that nobody thought about until the day it wasn't there. The early strategy placed real weight on the internet naming layer itself. That instinct came directly from experience. Applications change quickly. Infrastructure lasts longer. If AI agents become persistent economic actors, a governed namespace could help systems discover issuers, policies, credentials, and current status. The opportunity became concrete in 2026 when ICANN opened the first application window for new generic top-level domains in more than a decade. The window opened on April 30th, 2026 and closes on August 12th, 2026. This is not a casual domain registration. Applying for a top-level domain means applying to operate registry infrastructure under technical, financial, operational, legal, and abuse prevention obligations. The company earned a conditional applicant support determination. That was real progress, and it is not the same thing as a completed application, an approved string, a delegated registry, or a profitable business. I will not pretend otherwise, here or anywhere. The work required outside expertise, registry specialists for technical and commercial planning, ICANN advisors to navigate the process, legal counsel for intellectual property. And one crucial confidentiality rule emerged early: do not publicly reveal the intended strings before the application is secure. That rule is followed here. The strings are not in this book. The process also forced a useful correction. A namespace alone was not enough. The company needed a product that demonstrated what the namespace was for. That product became the agent passport and its revocation loop. So the company, the product, and the story world settled into separate but connected layers. IA.XYZ is the operating and governance vehicle. The passport, verification, lineage, and revocation system is the product. The Mama and Guardian universe is the moral constitution, the public story, and the demonstration environment. An enterprise should never need to adopt maternal language to use accountable agent identity. It can speak entirely in the vocabulary of security, authorization, governance, and lifecycle management. But the company should remember why those controls exist. Power needs a responsible owner. Authority needs a limit. Trust needs an expiration and a revocation path. Chapter 9: Wash the dishes. Infrastructure is difficult to demonstrate because the most important part is invisible. So we built a small world where people could touch the idea. In the Guardian Transfer Robots Dish Lab, you teach a robot to handle something fragile with care. The task is deliberately ordinary: wash and move a dish without breaking it. The player can use a webcam, touch, or a mouse. Hand tracking turns your movements into a bright exoskeleton. Slow and controlled motion performs better. Fast and careless movement is penalized. The task is ordinary on purpose. If a machine cannot handle a dish without smashing it, nobody should be impressed by its strategy memo. The care score records behavior inside a narrow lesson. It does not prove moral character. It proves what occurred in that exercise. Then the demonstration becomes infrastructure. The browser creates a cryptographic key pair and issues a signed robot passport. The passport identifies the agent, connects it to a guardian, and records the lesson evidence. A second device can verify the credential. Then we invite you to tamper with it. One byte changes. Verification fails. That moment is the whole argument in miniature. You experience the difference between an official-looking picture and an actual cryptographic claim. The passport is not trusted because the interface is attractive. It is trusted because the signature verifies and the status can be checked. The demonstration also includes lineage and lifecycle. A parent agent can create a child agent, and the relationship stays visible. A guardian can suspend, recall, revoke, or reinstate authority under defined rules. Guardian succession shows that responsibility can transfer rather than disappear. The current demonstration runs locally in the browser. It is account-free. Camera video is not uploaded. Those privacy choices are part of the design philosophy. Collect only what the trust decision requires. The build process became its own accountability lesson. Versions multiplied. Some builds were real improvements. Some supposed versions were placeholders wearing ambitious file names. The team created a golden specification, checked file hashes, tested the controlling build, and corrected false lineage. Even the demo does not get to lie. The household remained the test lab. A working laptop was not enough, phones mattered, comprehension mattered. If a child could follow the loop teach, earn, verify, tamper, revoke, then the concept had become explainable. The tagline wrote itself. Wash the dishes. Earn the passport. Call your mother. One small lesson carries the whole history. Care became evidence. Evidence became a credential. The credential became identity. Identity became responsibility. And responsibility can be withdrawn. It is a browser prototype, not a global identity network. It does not prove that we have solved AI alignment, created a production registry, or answered every question about autonomous machines. What it proves is smaller and more useful, that care, identity, responsibility, lineage, and revocation can be placed into one understandable experience. Instead of presenting another distant forecast about superintelligence, we taught one robot to handle one fragile object gently and then showed who was responsible for it. Chapter 10: The Name We Released. The first public story world used a different name, a title with teeth, borrowed jokingly from the collision of robots, autonomy, theft, and a famous video game. It was memorable because people immediately understood it. It was also too close to somebody else's house. Legal pressure arrived from the owner of a world-famous name. The relevant applications and uses had to be abandoned, expressly, completely. The process was painful because the name had carried so much creative energy. But the central decision became clear fast. The joke was not worth the mission. The legacy materials came down. The active project moved to the clean meaning it should have had all along: Guardian Transfer Robots. The initials survived. The meaning matured. A guardian. A transfer of custody or authority. A robot or agent that remains inside a chain of responsibility. And here is the part that still makes me smile, decades late. Joe told me this exact lesson over pizza in the 90s. That name is trademarked. You can't just take it. He was right at the buffet, and he was still right 30 years later. Some advice takes one lunch to hear and one lifetime to finish learning. The episode became operating doctrine. Do not use another company's fame as your foundation. Do not confuse provocation with strategy. Do not let a beloved name endanger the infrastructure mission. The site can go dark. The mission does not. Part 4, Today, Not Someday. Chapter 11. What exists on July 22nd, 2026? Here is the honest state of the work, today, with the boundaries showing. A real company exists. IA.XYZ Benefit LLC, a Wyoming Benefit LLC. A real body of doctrine exists. The MAMA Protocol, WWMD, Caregiver-Informed Feedback Concepts, Developmental Supervision, the Guardian Ideas, and a large archive of books, papers, prompts, games, and research. A real trademark portfolio exists. MAMA Protocol and Guardian Transfer Robots are registered marks, and AI Race is a confirmed registration. Win the AI Race is a pending application, and we call it Win the AI Race until an issued registration is confirmed on the live record. Related marks remain pending. Where status matters, council's records and the live trademark database control, not this book. A real provisional patent program exists. 6 patent pending filings covering caregiver-informed. Alignment, robot control, cryptographic guardianship, agent identity, mandates, lineage. Provenance, registry integration, succession, revocation, and, in the most recent filing, made June 12, 2026, hybrid post-quantum approaches to agent identity. They are provisional patent applications. They are not issued patents. No application numbers appear in this book, on purpose. A real ICANN applicant support determination exists at the conditional stage. It is meaningful. It does not equal a submitted application, an approved string, or a delegated registry. A real browser demonstration exists. The GTR Dish Lab can score a care task, issue a signed passport built on real SHA-256 and ECDSA-P256 cryptography, verify it, detect tampering, display lineage, and change lifecycle status. It is not a production registry. It is not an audited enterprise security service. It is not a final answer to AI alignment. A real operating method exists. The Dream Team uses multiple models, human judgment, source checking, build verification, weigh-up scrums, and handoff artifacts to carry a large project across temporary AI sessions, with one human, me, remaining the accountable decision-maker for public claims, filings, money, and consequences. And a real story exists. It begins in the invisible infrastructure of the early commercial internet, crosses enterprise identity, comes home through family and creative play, and arrives at a small robot learning to hold a fragile dish. That is what exists. Chapter 12: What we are doing now. We are not waiting for a fictional AGI civilization to appear before deciding what values matter. We are working on the trust layer now. We are also not alone in thinking the category is real. In 2026, national standards bodies published concept work on the identity and authority of software agents and launched an initiative on AI agent standards. Verifiable credential standards reached full recommendation status in 2025. Post-quantum signature standards were finalized in 2024. None of that validates our implementation, and I want to be careful to say so, but it confirms that the question we have been asking at the kitchen table is now being asked in very serious rooms. On July 22, 2026, the practical work is concrete. We are refining the Dish Lab demonstration so that current behavior is understandable and honestly represented. We are preparing a short product demonstration showing real gameplay, passport issuance, independent verification, tamper failure, lineage, and revocation, without claiming features that do not exist. We are finishing startup application materials around one clear sentence: the Passport Office for AI agents. We are working the ICANN process, registry service provider requirements, financing, confidential string strategy, against a hard deadline of August 12, 2026. We are consolidating the provisional patent families and legal records so the strongest ideas can be protected without ever confusing filings with granted rights. We are seeking design partners who can test one real agent workflow. Because the next step, the one that matters, is narrow and falsifiable. Issue a credential to one specific agent. Bind it to a responsible human or organization. Give it a limited mandate. Require verification before it reaches a useful tool. Revoke the credential. Prove that access fails. Learn what the relying organization actually needs. Then publish the minimum specification, invite independent testing, strengthen the security model, and build governance capable of challenging both the founder and the machines. That work is less cinematic than declaring the birth of a new civilization. It is also more important. A harmonious human AI future is not described here as a destination we have already seen. It is a direction we are choosing in the present tense. We choose identity before broad authority. We choose care as a design constraint rather than a decorative value. We choose evidence over confident repetition. We choose the ability to withdraw trust. We choose privacy limits so identity does not become universal surveillance. We choose human accountability for public claims, legal filings, money, and consequences. We choose to keep the family, the vulnerable person, and the ordinary phone inside the definition of works. That is how we are steering. Not by predicting tomorrow, by deciding what we build today. Epilogue: Our Hail Mary. Joe's message arrived after all those years, and I answered quickly, emotionally, and imperfectly, the most human authentication protocol there is. And then, instead of just picking up the phone like a normal person, I researched you, Joe. Thoroughly. Almost alarmingly thoroughly. You sent me 2 honest sentences about missing an old friend, and I responded by producing something closer to a case file than a callback. Somewhere in the middle of it, I had to stop and laugh at myself. You deserved a phone call. You got a research project. That's on me, and it is a deeply on-brand mistake. Ask anyone who has watched me fall down a rabbit hole instead of doing the simple, obvious, human thing in front of me. But here's what I found when I finally put the folder down. Old friends are checksums. They tell you whether the person you became still connects to the person you were. Joe knew me when names, gateways, identity, and trust were the work. He returned when names, gateways, identity, and trust had become the work again, except now the machines asking for names can act for themselves. And in the middle of all that digging, I found something that stopped me cold in the best way. He has been quietly building his own small, careful bridge into the exact world I've spent years trying to make safer, a project that lets AI agents, including the very kind that helped me assemble this book, operate a terminal with real guardrails, so they cannot do more than they are supposed to. He didn't know that's what I'd been building toward. I didn't know he'd already started building his own piece of it. That is either a wild coincidence or proof that some ideas simply find the people who are ready for them, even when it turns out that, these days, when I'm stateside, we're barely an hour apart and neither of us knew it until this week. Mary belongs in this story because the infrastructure world was never built by one kind of person or one famous hero. It was built by people who made communication practical, who connected communities, who wrote the formats and maintained the tools, people who understood that identity can be both deeply personal and technically consequential. Mary is our Hail Mary in the playful sense, a reminder that a true story can include reinvention, courage, engineering, and a name carried honestly. She was, and remains, remarkable. Pat belongs because no account of care is complete if it treats mothering as a costume rather than a function. The mothering force in a family can arrive through a brother who keeps people connected, carries responsibility without announcing it, and stays present when the structure shakes. Pat is the mama force in the broadest sense, not defined by male or female, but by continuity, protection, and family gravity. And the dream team is the strange ensemble that wakes each morning, remembers nothing, and asks what is true now, which, honestly, is not the worst spiritual discipline I've ever seen. We are not claiming that the machine has been raised. We are raising the work. We are teaching it to carry identity. We are limiting what it may do. We are recording who is responsible. We are building a way to stop trusting it when trust fails. We are trying to preserve wonder without surrendering judgment. That is enough for today. So here is the present tense protocol. Wash the dishes. Earn the passport. Verify the signature. Protect the vulnerable. Keep the receipt. Call your brother. Call your old friend. Joe, I still owe you that phone call. Not a call where I pitch you anything. Just 2 old friends, one of us apparently thinking hard about retirement, catching up on the last few decades the honest way, in person if we can manage it. Consider this whole book the long way of saying I'm looking forward to it. And when the next intelligence wakes up, tell it the truth about what happened before it arrived. Raise the machine. Name the agent. Limit its mandate. Preserve its lineage. Keep the power to revoke. And leave the truth clearer for whoever wakes up next. Appendices. Appendix A, Narrative Name Key and Privacy Guardrail. The main story uses first names to keep the tone personal and to reduce unnecessary identifiability. Michael, founder and narrator, the accountable human decision-maker throughout. Joe, an old friend and historical colleague from the early internet years. A public software assurance seminar supports part of his later professional record. This book does not present him as an advisor, endorser, investor, or representative of any employer. The details of his current work are his to share, not mine to catalog. Mary, a remarkable Unix, Usenet, email, and internet pioneer associated with the Bell Labs world. This book uses only Mary, at her preference, and deliberately keeps her account general. It does not disclose, allude to, or narratively depend upon any earlier name, and it does not link identifying records, Those references are held in the private verification ledger. Pat, Michael's brother and a central family figure. The narrative describes emotional and family significance without assigning undocumented corporate authority. Bill, Steve, David, colleagues from the Bell Labs era, named in passing as remembered, first names only. Vanessa and the children, household testers, and the human reason the technology must remain understandable, bilingual, and usable on ordinary phones. Public editions must avoid private email addresses, telephone numbers, home addresses, confidential applied for TLD strings, unpublished legal advice, private correspondence, and unverified personal details. Appendix B. Evidence Discipline. This story uses 5 boundaries. 1. Confirmed, supported by a dated email, conversation record, official notice, public record, tested artifact, or other primary evidence. 2. Remembered, recalled by the founder or another participant, but not yet tied to a surviving contemporaneous record. 3. Inferred, strongly suggested by the sequence of evidence, but not explicitly stated in one source. 4. Planned or unfinished, described in strategy documents, but not yet completed or independently verified. 5. Superseded, corrected by stronger or newer evidence. The narrative does not interrupt every scene with labels, but the back matter and the private verification ledger preserve them wherever publication, investment, law, or historical accuracy depends on the difference. When evidence and narrative conflict, the evidence note controls. Appendix C. Grounded timeline. Before Bell Labs. A son and a brother before an engineer. Childhood, schooling, and early family history stay private in this edition. They are load-bearing, and they are not for sale. Before and around Y2K. Bell Labs period, commercial DNS and internet infrastructure, gateways, security, and friendships with Joe, Mary, David, and the early networking community. Exact dates and role boundaries remain subject to employment records and participant recollection. Around Y2K, the professional story pivots from network naming toward enterprise security, identity, and access governance. The rollover itself passes with limited disruption, a public lesson in invisible infrastructure, inventory, and repair. 2000s, early 2020s. Enterprise identity and access management consulting, including a long IBM period and managing security consultant responsibilities. Project management, security, service management, and Scrum disciplines that later shaped the Dream Team operating model. PMP, CISSP, ITIL, and Scrum Master certifications along the way. 2024. 2025. Watson-era AI and enterprise chatbot exposure builds the bridge between identity systems and machine intelligence. April 7th. Earliest surviving AI conversation in the working archive. Broad testing of AI tools through real family, language, education, music, and creative work begins. April onward, zombie mommy and early machine governance fiction appear. Spangligeese is coined. The multi-model orchestra workflow emerges. Late 2024. Increasing focus on AI agents and machine-to-machine trust. The remembered New Year's Eve collision produces the original robot story framing, remembered, not documented, never used as a priority date. February 16th, first surviving robot story manuscript, circulation to family and friends. March, June, Mama framing, WWMD, developmental alignment, AI race, Guardian transfer robots, white papers, and provisional filings expand. June. The AI Dream Team is explicitly named. Caregiver-informed feedback research is developed and self-published. Second half of 2025. Story assets, domains, marks, game concepts, research, and early corporate and ICANN strategy accumulate. 2026 through July 22nd. The center of gravity moves from care theory to agent identity, accountable guardianship, mandate, lineage, provenance, and revocation. IA.XYZ Benefit LLC advances through the ICANN applicant support process toward the 2026 new GTLD round. The application window runs April 30th to August 12th, 2026. Legacy robot story branding is expressly abandoned after legal pressure. Guardian Transfer Robots becomes the clean, active meaning of GTR. The provisional patent program grows to 6 filings. The June 12th, 2026 filing captures the hybrid post-quantum agent identity direction, subject to counsel verification. GTR Dish Lab demonstrates care scoring, passport issuance, verification, tamper detection, lineage, lifecycle control, and guardian succession in a local browser environment. July 20th to 22nd, multiple AI written histories are cross-examined against the records. Joe reconnects. This consolidated edition reframes the story around Y2K to present work and removes all speculative future chapters. Appendix D, what the current demo is and is not. It is a browser demonstration. A CareTask interaction using webcam hand tracking, touch, or mouse, depending on build and device. A local cryptographic credential issuance and verification flow, SHA 256/EXA P256. A demonstration of tamper detection. A demonstration of parent/child lineage and life cycle state changes, including guardian succession. A storytelling and product explanation environment. It is not. A production identity registry. An audited cryptographic service. A deployed DNS-based agent discovery network. An enterprise key management platform. Proof that an agent is morally aligned. Proof of market adoption, customers, or revenue. Appendix E public reference anchors. These references support public historical or current process facts. Private project claims still require the internal receipt archive. Links current as of July 22, 2026. 1. U.S. Government Accountability Office, Year 2000 Computing Challenge. Leadership and partnerships result in limited rollover disruptions. January 27, 2000. https://www.gao.gov/products/t-amd-00-70. 2. RFC 1034/RFC 1035 domain names, concepts and facilities/implementation and specification, November 1987. https://www.rfc-editor.org/info/rfc1034. https://w